The massive space station floated in the darkness between stars, its metal surface gleaming under the light of distant suns. Inside the main meeting hall, representatives from 47 different alien species sat in their specially designed chairs and breathing chambers. Some breathed oxygen like humans, others required methane or hydrogen. A few didn't breathe at all. Commander Jake Morrison stood at the center of the circular room, feeling very small and very human. His dark blue uniform bore the simple patch of Earth Defense Initiative, showing a blue and green planet surrounded by stars. Around him, creatures with tentacles, crystal bodies, insect-like shells, and forms he couldn't even describe watched. Him with eyes, sensors, and organs he didn't recognize. The Galactic Council had been running for over 3,000 years. In all that time, every new species that joined had followed the same pattern. They would send their best ships, show off their greatest inventions, talk about their proudest moments, and promise to be good neighbors. The Council expected the same from these strange beings called humans. Jake looked down at his tablet and took a deep breath. Thank you for welcoming us today. I know you're expecting to hear about our achievements in our culture. But first, we want to tell you about our mistakes. A low rumble went through the room as the translation devices worked to convert his words into 47 different languages. The crystalline Vorton representative, who looked like a walking diamond, dimmed its natural glow. The insect-like Cathara delegate clicked its mandibles in what might have been confusion. This is unusual, said the Zephyrian ambassador, a tall, gray being with large black eyes. His voice came through the translator with a musical quality. New species typically present their greatest accomplishments first. Jake nodded. We understand that. But humans believe you can't really know us unless you know what we've learned from our failures. He pressed a button on his tablet, and a holographic display filled the center of the room. It showed Earth as it appeared from space, blue and white and beautiful. Then the image changed, showing the same planet but darker, with brown patches where green should be. 200 years ago, we nearly destroyed our own world, Jake said simply. We cut down our forests, poisoned our oceans, and filled our air with smoke. We knew we were doing it, but we kept doing it anyway because stopping would have been expensive and difficult. The alien delegates leaned forward in their seats. This was not what they had expected to hear. We fought wars that killed millions of our own kind over things like skin color and religious beliefs, Jake continued. The hologram showed images of battlefields, destroyed cities, and refugees fleeing their homes. We enslaved other humans and told ourselves it was natural and right. We discriminated against our own people because they loved differently than we did. Dr. Lisa Campbell stepped forward to join Jake at the display. She was a small woman with graying hair who had spent her whole career studying life on other worlds. Now she found herself trying to explain human life to those other worlds. We made these mistakes not because we were stupid or evil, she said. We made them because we were learning. Every human civilization has had to learn the same hard lessons. The difference is, we decided to remember those lessons and teach them to our children. She gestured to the hologram, which now showed a timeline stretching back thousands of years. Red markers indicated wars, disasters, and atrocities. Green markers showed the changes that came after each red marker. After each terrible mistake, we asked ourselves how to make sure it never happened again. We wrote laws, changed our governments, and taught our children different values. When we polluted our planet, we invented clean energy. When we discriminated against our people, we created equal rights. When we fought wars over resources, we learned to share. The Dominar of the Centauri Collective, a being that looked like a cross between an octopus and a tree, spoke through its translator. This is unprecedented. Other species typically conceal their past errors when seeking council membership. Jake smiled, though he wasn't sure how many of the aliens would understand the expression. That's exactly why we're telling you about them. See, the thing about humans is we don't believe in hiding our mistakes. We believe in learning from them. He changed the holographic display again. Now it showed Earth as it was today, green and blue and healthy, surrounded by space stations and ships. Today our planet is cleaner than it was 200 years ago, even though we have 3 times as many people living on it. We've ended most forms of discrimination, though we're still working on some. We haven't had a major war in over 50 years, and when conflicts do arise, we've gotten pretty good at solving them without violence. Dr. Campbell nodded. The key is that we don't pretend we're perfect now. We know we'll make new mistakes because that's what learning creatures do, but we've gotten good at recognizing our mistakes quickly and fixing them before they get too big. The room was very quiet. The aliens were not used to this kind of honesty from a species seeking to join their council. Most civilizations spent centuries hiding their dark histories, presenting only their successes and achievements. You document your failures? Asked the hegemony of Altair's representative, a tall being with silver skin and no visible mouth. Openly? We have entire fields of study dedicated to it, Lisa replied. History, sociology, psychology, political science. We study why we make mistakes so we can avoid making them again. We teach our children about the worst things we've ever done so they'll know how to be better. Jake gestured to the timeline still floating in the air. Every red mark on this display represents something terrible that humans did to other humans or to our planet. We don't hide these things or pretend they didn't happen. We remember them because they taught us how to be better. The Vorthan delegate brightened again, which seemed to indicate interest. And you believe this? Learning from failure is important for us to understand about your species? It's the most important thing about us, Jake said. See, we've noticed something interesting about galactic history. A lot of species reach a certain level of development and then just stop growing. They find a system that works okay and stick with it forever. Other species grow so fast they destroy themselves. He paused, looking around the room at faces and forms he was still learning to read. Humans seem to be different. We keep growing and changing, but we do it carefully. We learn from our mistakes instead of repeating them or being destroyed by them. Dr. Campbell stepped forward again. We wanted you to know this about us up front because it affects everything else. When we solve problems, we solve them by first admitting we have a problem. When we build things, we build them expecting they'll need to be improved later. When we make agreements, we include ways to change those agreements as we learn more. The session was supposed to last for several hours, with humans presenting their technology, their culture, their military capabilities, and their trade offerings. Instead, it ended after just 1 hour, with the alien delegates requesting time to discuss what they had heard. As Jake and Lisa gathered their materials, they could hear the sounds of 47 different species talking urgently among themselves in frequencies ranging from subsonic rumbles to ultrasonic squeaks. Do you think we made a mistake? Lisa asked quietly. Jake looked around the room at the clusters of alien delegates, all of them focused on intense discussions. If we did, we'll learn from it, he said. That's what humans do. 3 months had passed since the humans had shocked the Galactic Council with their strange presentation about failures and mistakes. The massive research vessel Harmony floated in orbit around the Council's main research station, its hull gleaming. With both human and alien technology working together, Dr. Amy Rodriguez sat in the ship's main laboratory, staring at data that made no sense according to everything the galaxy thought it knew about how civilizations developed. Around her, alien scientists from 12 different species worked at stations designed for their various body types and environmental needs. This cannot be correct, said Zaketh, the lead Kithera researcher. The insect-like being's compound eyes reflected the holographic displays showing human psychological profiles. Your data must be flawed. Amy shook her head and pulled up another chart. I've checked it 17 times. The patterns are consistent across every human population we've studied. The data was disturbing to alien minds that had spent millennia believing they understood how intelligent species evolved. Every other known civilization followed predictable patterns. They either became more peaceful over time, focusing on art and philosophy while their technology stagnated, or they became more aggressive, developing better weapons until they eventually destroyed themselves. Humans did both at the same time, and somehow survived it. Look at this timeline, Amy said, pointing to a display that showed human technological development over the past 1,000 years. See these spikes in military technology? They happen at the same time as major advances. In medicine, agriculture, and communication, Zaketh's mandibles clicked in what Amy had learned was the Kithera equivalent of confusion. Impossible. Species that develop weapons of mass destruction do not simultaneously develop life-saving technologies. The mindset required for each is completely different. That's what makes humans weird, Amy replied. We use the same innovative thinking for both creation and destruction. The same human brain that figures out how to build a nuclear bomb also figures out how to use nuclear energy to power hospitals. Dr. Vextar, a crystalline Vorthan whose body pulsed with soft blue light, dimmed slightly as it processed this information. Your species appears to have an unprecedented capacity for what you call cognitive flexibility. You can hold contradictory ideas and use both simultaneously. Amy nodded. We call it thinking outside the box. Most problems have more than one solution, so we try to find all of them, even the ones that seem to contradict each other. Meanwhile, halfway across the galaxy, Captain Steve Mitchell was discovering just how strange this human trait appeared to other species. His ship, the New Horizon, had been assigned to make contact with isolated civilizations that the Galactic Council had given up on centuries ago. Captain, said Lieutenant Karen Brooks, his diplomatic officer, we're getting a response from the Ravak homeworld. Steve raised an eyebrow. The Ravak had been declared permanently hostile by the Council after they had attacked every diplomatic mission sent to their system for the past 200 years. The Council's official policy was to avoid Ravak space entirely. What kind of response? Steve asked. They're inviting us to dinner. Steve stared at her. Dinner? Yes, sir. Apparently their tribal leaders want to share a meal and exchange stories with us. This was the 5th impossible contact they had made in just 2 months. Species that had been written off as too primitive, too aggressive, or too alien were responding to human contact in ways that baffled the Council's experts. 3 days later, Steve found himself sitting around a fire on the Ravak homeworld, sharing roasted meat with beings that looked like crosses between bears and lizards. The Ravak had fearsome claws and sharp teeth, but they were laughing at stories that Karen was telling about human children learning to walk. Your young ones fall down many times before they learn to stand? Asked Graxak, the eldest of the Ravak tribal leaders. His voice was deep and rough, but his tone was curious rather than threatening. All the time, Karen replied with a smile. We have a saying. If at first you don't succeed, try again. Humans expect to fail many times before we get something right. Graxak's eyes widened, showing more white than the Council's xenobiologists had thought possible. This is why you do not fear us as the others do. You are not afraid of failure. Steve leaned forward, interested. What do you mean? The others who came before, Graxak explained, gesturing with one massive claw. They came expecting to succeed immediately. When we showed them our strength, they became afraid and aggressive. They assumed we were dangerous because we did not submit to them right away. Karen nodded slowly. But humans are used to things not working out perfectly the first time. When you showed your strength, we just thought, okay, they're strong. How do we work with that? Exactly, said another Ravak, younger but still impressive. You did not try to make us weak. You tried to understand why we are strong. Back on the research vessel, Amy was presenting her findings to a group of very uncomfortable alien scientists. The main conference room was filled with representatives from the galaxy's most advanced civilizations, all of them trying to understand data that challenged their basic assumptions about intelligence and progress. The pattern is consistent across every human settlement we've studied, Amy explained, pointing to a complex chart. Humans don't approach problems by trying to eliminate variables. They approach problems by trying to use as many variables as possible. The hegemony of Altair's representative, a tall being with silver skin, shifted uncomfortably in its chair. This explains the disturbing reports we're receiving from Council worlds. What reports? Asked Dr. Kethmar from the Centauri Collective. Several member civilizations are requesting human mediation for conflicts that have been ongoing for centuries. More concerning, they are asking humans to help them examine their own governmental and social structures. Amy felt a chill run down her spine. You find that concerning? Dr. Rodriguez, said the Altair representative carefully, stable civilizations do not typically request fundamental examinations of their core systems. Such examinations lead to change, and change leads to instability. Not for humans, Amy replied. For us, change is how we stay stable. We change constantly so we don't have to change catastrophically. Dr. Vextar pulsed a brighter blue. Please, explain this concept, Amy thought for a moment. Imagine a tree in a windstorm. A rigid tree breaks when the wind gets too strong, but a flexible tree bends with the wind and survives. Humans have learned to be flexible trees. But flexibility requires admitting that your current form is not perfect, pointed out Zakath. Most civilizations cannot psychologically accept this concept. That's exactly right, Amy said, and that's what makes humans different. We start with the assumption that we're not perfect and probably never will be, so we're always looking for ways to improve. The room fell silent as the alien scientists processed this information. Finally, Dr. Kethmar spoke up. Dr. Rodriguez, are you suggesting that the secret to human success is the assumption of human failure? Amy smiled. Not failure, incompleteness. We assume we don't know everything yet, so we keep learning. We assume our current solutions aren't the best possible solutions, so we keep looking for better ones. We assume that even our fundamental beliefs might be wrong, so we keep testing them. The silence that followed was even deeper than before. Amy realized she had just described something that most galactic civilizations found deeply threatening. The idea that any system, no matter how old or successful, could be improved or even completely changed. This explains much about recent events, the Altair representative said quietly. Human contact is causing what our sociologists are calling systematic doubt among our populations. Citizens are beginning to question institutions that have been unquestioned for millennia. Amy felt the weight of what was happening settling on her shoulders. Humans weren't just joining galactic civilization. They were changing it in ways that no one, including humans themselves, had anticipated. What does the Council plan to do about this? She asked. The alien scientists looked at each other with expressions she was learning to read as deep concern. We are not certain there is anything we can do, Vextar replied, its light dimming to almost nothing. The question is whether galactic civilization can survive the changes your species is causing. Captain Danny Foster stood on the bridge of his ship, watching something that nobody in the galaxy had seen before. On the main screen, two fleets that had been pointing weapons at each other for 800 years were now flying in formation, together. I still can't believe it worked, said Lieutenant Maria Santos, his communications officer. She was young and had joined the crew expecting to fight battles, not solve ancient conflicts that had stumped the galaxy's best diplomats for centuries. Believe it, Danny replied, though he was just as amazed as she was. 3 months ago, the Xerian system and the Nexus Alliance had been locked in the longest Cold War in galactic history. Their fleets patrolled the border between their territories, never firing but never backing down. The Galactic Council had sent mediators 17 times over the centuries. All of them had failed. Then the humans had arrived. Captain, said Dr. Rachel Stevens, the human sociologist who had led the mediation team, I'm getting final confirmation from both sides. They want to sign the peace agreement next week. Danny shook his head in wonder. Rachel, how did you do it? The Council's best negotiators couldn't even get these people to talk to each other. Rachel smiled, but she looked tired. The past 3 months had been intense. It's not that we're better negotiators, we just ask different questions. She pulled up a holographic display showing the meeting transcripts from previous mediation attempts. Look at this. Every previous mediator tried to figure out who was right and who was wrong. They spent years analyzing the original conflict, going through historical records trying to determine which side had the legitimate claim. That seems logical, said Lieutenant Santos. It is logical, Rachel agreed. But it doesn't work. When you spend all your time arguing about who was right 800 years ago, you never get around to talking about what both sides need today. She changed the display to show the human mediation sessions. We started by asking both sides the same question. What do you actually want now? Not what you wanted 800 years ago, Not what you think you deserve, but what you actually need to build the future you want for your people. Danny studied the transcripts. The difference was stark. Where previous mediation sessions had been filled with historical arguments and legal debates, the human sessions focused on practical needs and shared goals. The Xerians wanted security for their trade routes and protection for their outer colonies. Rachel continued. The Nexus Alliance wanted access to rare minerals and recognition of their territorial sovereignty. Once we got them talking about that instead of ancient grievances, finding solutions became much easier. On the planet below, the historic signing ceremony was being prepared. Representatives from both civilizations were working together to plan an event that would have been impossible just months ago. But the success at Xerion was just one example of something happening across the galaxy. Human contact was causing changes that were making the established powers very nervous. Admiral Patricia Clark had been called to an emergency session at the Galactic Council's headquarters. As she walked through the halls of the massive station, she could feel the tension in the air. Alien diplomats huddled in small groups, speaking in urgent whispers. The main council chamber was packed when she arrived. Representatives from all 47 member civilizations were present, along with observers from dozens of non-member species. The mood was unlike anything she had experienced in her 20 years of diplomatic service. The situation has become critical, announced the Dominar of the Centauri Collective, a being that resembled a tree made of metal and crystal. Human influence is spreading faster than we anticipated, and the results are destabilizing established order throughout the galaxy. Admiral Clark took her seat at the human delegation table. With respect, Dominar, I'm not sure I understand the problem. From our perspective, we're helping resolve conflicts and improve relations between species. The Zephyrian ambassador stood up, his tall gray form towering over most of the other delegates. Admiral Clark, in the past 6 months, 12 different civilizations have requested human assistance in restructuring their governments. The hegemony of Altair, one of our oldest and most stable members, has asked for help examining what they call fundamental flaws in their 3,000-year-old empire. Admiral Clark felt a chill run down her spine. She was beginning to understand why everyone looked so worried. The problem, continued the hegemony's silver-skinned representative, is that we have discovered we cannot answer your species' questions without questioning everything we believe about civilization itself. Dr. Nicole Wright, Earth's chief Dao, cultural analyst, leaned forward in her chair. What questions are you referring to? Simple questions, replied the hegemony representative. Questions like, why do you do things this way? And, has this system always worked well for everyone? And what would happen if you tried something different? The room was silent as the implications sank in. These questions seem harmless, the representative continued, but they lead to other questions. And those lead to still more questions. Before long, our citizens are questioning institutions that have existed longer than most species have had. Space travel. Dr. Wright nodded slowly. And that scares you? It terrifies us, admitted the crystalline Vorthon delegate, its body pulsing with agitated colors. Our civilization has remained stable for over 4,000 years by maintaining consistent systems and avoiding unnecessary change. Your questions threaten that stability. Captain Tony Martinez, who had been listening quietly, finally spoke. Up. But what if your stability is actually stagnation? What if avoiding change is preventing you from solving problems that could destroy you eventually? The reaction was immediate. Delegates began talking urgently among themselves in dozens of different languages. The translation system struggled to keep up with the overlapping conversations. You don't understand, said the Cathera representative, its mandibles clicking rapidly. Change is dangerous. Change leads to conflict. Change destroys civilizations. No, said Dr. Wright firmly. Refusing to change destroys civilizations. We've studied the archaeological records of 17 different species that reached space travel and then vanished. Every single one of them followed the same pattern. They reached a stable configuration and then stopped growing, stopped learning, stopped adapting. Eventually, they faced a problem their static systems couldn't handle, and they collapsed. She stood up and activated a holographic display showing the archaeological sites they had discovered. These species all chose safety over growth. They all decided that maintaining their current systems was more important than improving those systems, and they all died out within 50 to 200 years of making that choice. The chamber fell completely silent. Admiral Clark stood up next to Dr. Wright. Humans are different because we learned early that perfect stability is actually death. A system that never changes is a system that can't adapt to new challenges. We learned to be comfortable with constant small changes so we could avoid catastrophic big changes. But how do you maintain social cohesion if your systems are constantly changing? Asked the Altair representative. By focusing on principles instead of procedures, Dr. Wright replied. Our core values stay the same, but the ways we implement those values keep evolving as we learn more and face new situations. The Dominar of the Centauri Collective raised one of its metal branches. Dr. Wright, are you suggesting that our greatest strength, our stability, is actually our greatest weakness? Dr. Wright looked around the room at faces and forms representing thousands of years of galactic civilization. I'm suggesting that maybe it's time to find out. The emergency session ended with no decisions made, but everyone knew that the galaxy had reached a turning point. The question was no longer whether human influence would change galactic civilization. The question was whether that civilization would choose to change or choose to fight the change. Outside the station's windows, human ships could be seen arriving and departing, carrying diplomats and scientists and teachers to worlds that had never before asked for help in questioning themselves. The age of comfortable stagnation was ending, whether the galaxy liked it or not. Admiral Chris Bailey had never seen the Galactic Council chamber so crowded. Every seat was filled and observers lined the walls. Representatives from civilizations that hadn't spoken to each other in centuries sat side by side, all united by the same concern: what to do about the humans. The vote that would determine the future of galactic civilization was scheduled to begin in 1 hour. 47 species would decide whether to accept humanity's influence and embrace change, or reject it and attempt to preserve the order that had kept the galaxy stable for thousands of years. Bailey looked around the chamber at faces and forms he had come to know over the past year. Some showed expressions he recognized as fear. Others displayed what might have been curiosity or hope. All of them looked like beings facing the most important decision of their lives. The emergency session will now come to order, announced the Dominar of the Centauri Collective. We are here to vote on Resolution 4471, whether to formally accept human membership in the Galactic Council, and the changes that such membership would bring to our civilization. Dr. Janet Parker, Earth's chief cultural liaison, sat quietly at the human delegation table. She had been preparing for this moment for months, but she still felt the weight of representing not just humanity, but the possibility of change itself. The Zephyrian ambassador was the first to speak. Over the past year, human contact has caused more change in galactic civilization than we have seen in the previous 1,000 years. The question before us is simple. Is this change beneficial or destructive? He gestured to a holographic display that showed a map of the galaxy. Dozens of systems were highlighted in different colors. The green systems represent conflicts that have been resolved through human mediation, he continued. Conflicts that our best diplomats had declared unsolvable. The blue systems represent civilizations that have requested human assistance in governmental or social reform. The red systems represent areas where traditional authority structures have been questioned or changed. There were a lot of red systems on the map. What concerns us, said the hegemony of Altair's representative, is that we do not know where this process ends. If we accept humanity's approach, how much of our existing civilization will survive? Admiral Bailey stood up. With respect, that's exactly the wrong question. The chamber fell silent. Speaking out of turn during formal council proceedings was unprecedented for a non-member species. The right question, Bailey continued, is, if we don't adapt and grow, how much of your existing civilization will survive anyway? He activated his own holographic display, showing the archaeological sites that Dr. Wright had discovered. These 17 civilizations all made the same choice you're facing today. They chose stability over growth. They chose familiar systems over better systems. They chose the comfort of staying the same over the risk of becoming something more. The display showed the ruins of once great cities, the remnants of space stations, the dead worlds where proud civilizations had once thrived. Every single one of these species was more advanced than humans are today, Bailey said. They had technologies we can barely understand. They had thousands of years of cultural development. They had everything they needed to survive forever. Paused, looking around the chamber. Everything except the ability to change when change was needed. The crystalline Vorthan delegate pulsed with agitated colors. But change is chaotic. Change is unpredictable. How can we maintain order if we embrace constant transformation? Dr. Parker stood up and walked to the center of the chamber. May I tell you what we've learned about your civilizations over the past year? The Dominar nodded permission. We've learned that you're all dying, Parker said simply. The reaction was immediate. Delegates began talking urgently among themselves, their voices rising in dozens of different frequencies and tones. Not physically, Parker continued, raising her voice to be heard. But culturally, intellectually, socially, you've been the same for so long that you've forgotten how to grow. Your birth rates are declining because your young people see no future worth creating. Your technologies have plateaued because your scientists see no problems worth solving. Your arts have stagnated because your artists have nothing new to express. The chamber gradually quieted as her words sank in. The stability you're so afraid of losing isn't actually making you stronger, Parker said. It's making you weaker. Every year you stay exactly the same, you become less capable of handling the unexpected, and the universe is full of the unexpected. The wow, Cathera representative clicked its mandibles. What you describe as weakness we call peace. What you call stagnation we call harmony. And that's fine, Parker replied. If you want to be like those 17 dead civilizations, they all thought they had achieved perfect harmony too. She walked over to the archaeological display and touched one of the images, showing a beautiful, crystal city that had once housed millions of beings. This was the eternal harmony of Kepler 438. They achieved perfect social stability 12,000 years ago. No conflict, no change, no problems. For 8,000 years, every day was exactly like the day before. Then a gamma ray burst, sterilized their system, and they couldn't adapt quickly enough to save themselves because they had forgotten how to change. The chamber was completely silent now. That's what really terrifies you about humans, Parker continued. Not that we might destroy your civilization, but that we might save it. Because saving it means admitting that it needs to be saved. She walked back to the center of the chamber, looking at each delegation in turn. We're not asking you to become like us. We're asking you to become like yourselves, but better. We're asking you to remember that being alive means growing, learning, changing, adapting. We're asking you to choose life over comfort. The Dominar raised one of its metallic branches. Dr. Parker, if we accept your species and your philosophy, what guarantee do we have that the changes will be positive? Parker smiled. None at all, that's the whole point. If we could guarantee the results, it wouldn't be growth, it would be programming. Real growth is always uncertain, but the alternative to uncertain growth is certain decay. Admiral Bailey joined her in the center of the chamber. The question isn't whether change is risky. The question is whether staying the same is riskier. The formal debate period ended, and the delegates were given time to consult among themselves before the vote. Admiral Bailey and Dr. Parker returned to their seats knowing that they had said everything they could say. Hours passed. Finally, the Dominar called for order. The voting will now commence. Each delegation will cast one vote, accept or reject. Resolution 4471. The voting process took nearly an hour, with each species taking time to make their position clear. When it was over, the results appeared on the main display. 46 votes to accept. 1 abstention. The chamber erupted in noise as delegates reacted to the unprecedented unanimous decision. Captain Alex Morgan was commanding the Earthship Endeavour, on routine patrol near the edge of human space when the priority transmission came in. He had been expecting news of the vote, but not the message that appeared on his screen. It wasn't from the Galactic Council. It was from the hegemony of Altair, one of the galaxy's oldest and most conservative civilizations. Captain Morgan. The message began. This is Senior Administrator Velthara of the Altair hegemony. We are transmitting this message simultaneously to all human vessels and colonies. Morgan called his senior staff to the bridge. We wish to formally request immediate diplomatic and cultural assistance. Our civilization has existed unchanged for 3,000 years, and we have realized that this may be our greatest weakness rather than our greatest strength. The message continued, but Morgan was already thinking about the implications. If the hegemony of Altair was requesting help with fundamental change, then every other civilization in the galaxy would soon follow. We want to learn how to question our assumptions without destroying our society. We want to learn how to change without losing our identity. We want to learn how to grow without chaos. The message ended with words that would be repeated across the galaxy in the coming months. We want to learn how to be alive again. More messages began arriving within hours. The Centauri Collective requested assistance with democratic reforms. The Zephyrian Republic wanted help dealing with social stagnation. The Cathara Consortium asked for guidance on encouraging innovation. All 47 members of the Galactic Council, plus dozens of non-member species, were asking the same question. How do we change safely? As Captain Morgan looked out at the stars, he realized that humanity had accomplished something unprecedented in galactic history. They hadn't conquered other civilizations through force or manipulation. They had inspired them to conquer their own fears. The age of comfortable stagnation was over. The age of terrifying, wonderful, necessary growth had begun. And for the first time in thousands of years, the galaxy was truly alive.